A German gunner lowers his eye to the sight. Late 1944. Western Germany. A road cut through frozen fields. A Sherman tank stopped in the open. And an 88mm gun waiting at a range where Shermans were not supposed to survive. The American tank is not moving. Its track is damaged. Its nose is pointed straight at the gun. There is no cover, no smoke, no clever maneuver left. To the German crew, this is not a fight anymore. It is a calculation. An 88 at this distance, a Sherman in the open, one armor-piercing shell, one dead tank. The gun fires. The shell crosses the field and strikes the front of the Sherman hard enough to throw sparks into the cold air. But the tank does not burn. The loader works again. Second round. Sparks. No fire. Third round. Fourth. Fifth. By the time the crew reaches the next shots, something has changed inside that German position. Not the gun. Not the range. Not the target. The certainty. Because every manual, every veteran, every battlefield habit in that crew's head says the same thing. A Sherman hit from the front by an 88 should open like a furnace. But this one is sitting there in the field, taking the punishment, and refusing to become what it is supposed to become. What the German crew cannot see is the trick. That tank is a Sherman. But it is also not the Sherman they think it is. It has the same basic outline, the same familiar hull, the same short gun that makes it look ordinary through a gun sight. But behind that familiar face is 8 extra tons of steel, welded and cast into a machine built for one brutal job, not to be faster, not to hit harder, not to look impressive, to be shot first, and live long enough for everyone behind it to fire back. This is the story of the M4A3E2 Sherman Jumbo. 254 tanks, a front plate thick enough to turn a death sentence into a question, and the quiet engineering decision that taught German gun crews to hesitate. Before the Jumbo appeared, the Sherman had a reputation that was both deserved and unfair. It was reliable. It was easy to repair. It could be built in enormous numbers. It crossed deserts, climbed Italian roads, fought through hedgerows, and carried Allied armies forward because it was the tank America could make, ship, fuel, fix, and replace. That mattered, but to the men inside it, there was another truth. When a German 88 found them from the front, all those virtues did not matter much. The 88 had begun life as an anti-aircraft gun. German crews learned early that if they lowered the barrel and pointed it at armor, it became one of the most frightening anti-tank weapons of the war. In North Africa, it tore through British armor at distances crews could barely believe. In Normandy, it waited behind hedgerows and field corners. In Germany, it guarded roads, village entrances, and open approaches. For American tankers, the sound was not abstract. It was a sharp crack, then impact, then smoke where another crew had been. A standard Sherman's front armor was never built to trade blows with that gun at ideal range. The Army knew it. Tank crews knew it. Maintenance men knew it from the burned-out hulls arriving behind the line. The problem was not that America had no idea what a better protected tank should look like. The problem was time. The M26 Pershing was still coming. The war was already here, and men were dying in machines that factories were producing faster than Doctrine could protect them. So the answer had to use what already existed, the same Sherman family, the same production logic, the same basic mechanical world. Then add what the front was screaming for: steel. At Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan, the M4A3E2 was built as an assault version of the Sherman. Its upper front hull was increased to just over 4 inches of armor, sloped back to make it effectively stronger. The gun mantlet was made massive, roughly 7 inches thick in front of the turret. The turret face itself became heavier. The hull carried more protection. The vehicle gained about 8 tons. It was still called a medium tank, but the men who saw it up close understood immediately that this was no ordinary medium tank. It was a Sherman with a steel jaw. And yet the most important part of the design was not only what had been added, it was what had been left alone. The Jumbo did not advertise itself like a new heavy tank. It did not arrive with a tall, unmistakable silhouette. It did not look like a different species from a kilometer away. From the front, in combat light, through smoke, rain, snow, and a German sight picture, it still looked like a Sherman. That was the hidden genius. The Army had not simply made a tougher tank. It had made the enemy's old knowledge dangerous. If a German gunner could instantly identify the Jumbo, he could change his aim, wait for a flank, or call for another weapon. But if the Jumbo looked like every other Sherman, then every lead Sherman became a question. Is this the normal one? Or is this the one that will eat my first round and show the whole American column where I am? That question was not painted on the armor. It lived in the pause before the trigger. And in armored combat, a pause is not empty space. It is time. Time for a commander to spot the flash. Time for a gunner to traverse. Time for infantry to drop. Time for artillery to begin its math. 3 seconds can be the distance between a hidden gun and a dead gun crew. Only 254 factory Jumbos were built. That number is almost absurd. More than 50,000 Shermans came out of American production during the war. The Jumbo was less than 1% of that family. And still, those 254 machines changed the behavior around every column that had one. Because commanders learned something that no manual had fully explained. The tank with the thickest face did not belong in the rear. It did not belong protected behind the column like a precious asset. It belonged at the front, where the first shot came. That was where German ambush doctrine lived. Kill the first vehicle, block the road, trap the rest, burn the column one tank at a time. It was simple, and it worked because the first shot was supposed to be final. The Jumbo broke that assumption. When the lead tank survived, the ambush revealed itself without finishing the job. The hidden gun gave up its position. The road did not close. The column did not freeze in panic. And the vehicles behind the Jumbo did what ordinary Shermans could do very well when given even a few extra seconds. They answered. This was how a small number of tanks began protecting a much larger force. Not by being everywhere, by being first. The first real proof came in the kind of places that punished every mistake. Aachen, the Ruhr approaches, rubble streets and frozen roads. Villages where an anti-tank gun might be waiting behind a wall, and a Panzerfaust team might be 10 steps away in a cellar. In those places, the Jumbo became less a vehicle than a bargain. The crew in front accepted the hit meant for the column. Everyone behind them got a chance to live long enough to fight. The men inside those tanks understood exactly what that bargain meant. They were not driving a magic machine. They were driving a heavier Sherman that was slower, harder on its suspension, and still vulnerable from the side, rear, and top. The front was strong. The whole tank was not invincible. That distinction mattered. A German shell hitting the glacis was one kind of problem. A soldier with a Panzerfaust firing from an upstairs window was another. In the forests and towns of Western Germany, the battlefield did not always come from the direction the engineers had reinforced. The crews knew this. That is why photographs from the winter showed Jumbos buried under sandbags, welded scrap, track links, mesh, and field improvisations that look almost desperate. Because they were desperate. The official armor was the Army's answer. The extra junk was the crew's answer. Some men stacked sandbags even when other men said sandbags would not stop a shaped charge. They stacked them anyway. Not because they were fools, because doing nothing while waiting for the next road junction was worse. Some field workshops went further. When factory jumbos were too few, welders began building poor man's jumbos from whatever the battlefield gave them. Armor plate cut from wrecks, spare track blocks, salvaged steel, even enemy armor reused against the army that had brought it there. This is one of the least glamorous parts of armored warfare, and one of the most important. A design office can create a solution. A factory can produce it. But a frontline maintenance crew has to keep it alive after the first mine, the first shell strike, the first cracked final drive, the first night when the tank comes back bleeding oil and carrying 5 men who do not want to be assigned to anything thinner tomorrow. The Jumbo was not only a product of engineering, it was a product of mechanics who believed the next layer of steel might be the difference between casualty report and breakfast. Then came the Ardennes. December 1944. Snow, bad roads. German armor moving through fog and forests. American units bending under the shock of the offensive. The 4th Armored Division was ordered toward Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne was surrounded. At the front of one column was a jumbo with the registration number 3083024. The crew called it Cobra King. Before it became famous, it did the ordinary work of a point tank. It moved first. It found danger first. It accepted the risk first. Near the route to Bastogne, it was hit and damaged, then repaired fast enough to get back into the column. That detail matters more than the famous photograph. Because the legend of Cobra King is usually told as a breakthrough story. The tank that reached Bastogne. The words painted on the hull. The moment the surrounded men were no longer alone. But the deeper story is that Cobra King reached Bastogne because the doctrine around it had learned the Jumbo's purpose. Put the tank designed to survive first contact at the point of contact. On December 26, 1944, Cobra King pushed through and linked up with the paratroopers. It became the visible symbol of relief. But it was also proof of an idea that had been forming in mud, steel shops, field reports, and burned roads for months. A point vehicle does not need to destroy every enemy by itself. It needs to survive the first violent answer. It needs to keep the formation moving. It needs to buy the seconds that let the rest of the force become dangerous. That is not heroic in the way posters like heroism. It is colder than that. It is geometry. One tank takes the most likely impact point, so the line behind it does not break. By early 1945, German units were adjusting. They had learned that not every Sherman in front of them was the Sherman they remembered from Tunisia, Sicily, or Normandy. Reports began warning crews not to waste frontal shots on certain American tanks if a flank shot could be arranged. That sentence, in practical terms, meant the lie had worked. The Germans still had lethal weapons. They still had skilled gunners. They still destroyed jumbos. But they were no longer looking at the lead Sherman with the clean confidence of earlier years. They had to ask one more question before firing. And asking one more question under fire is expensive. The American advantage was never that the jumbo could not be killed. It could. The advantage was that it was difficult to kill in exactly the direction German ambushes preferred. From the front, at the first contact, on the first shot. The front held often enough to change the rhythm of the fight. But as the war moved into forests and cities, the jumbo's strength also revealed its limits. In the Hürtgen forest, visibility shrank to the length of a road bend. Trees crowded the lanes. Mines and infantry weapons waited where tank armor was thinnest. A lead tank could survive an 88 from distance, and still be killed by a teenager with a Panzerfaust from the side. There is no such thing as invulnerability on a battlefield. There is only protection against the threat you predicted, and the threat that finds the seam you did not. That is what made Jumbo crews remarkable. They were not fooled by their own armor. They knew the front plate might save them from one kind of death and do nothing against another. They still took the front of the column, not because they believed the tank was immortal, because they understood the duty that came with being harder to kill. In Cologne, in March 1945, American armored columns entered a city smashed into stone dust and shadow. The streets gave every enemy gunner a flank if he waited long enough. Every intersection was a trap. Every upper window mattered. The Jumbo's role did not change. It led. When enemy armor or anti-tank fire appeared ahead, the Jumbo gave the formation a chance to absorb the opening blow. When the threat came from the side, even the Jumbo was in mortal danger. That balance is important. The story is not that a few inches of steel made a perfect tank. The story is that a few inches of steel, placed in the right direction, on the right vehicle, in the right position of the column, changed what everyone else could risk. This is why the Jumbo's small production run feels larger than the number. 254 is not enough to fill an army. It is enough to create uncertainty, enough to make a German gunner hesitate at a silhouette he once understood, enough to make an American commander save the thick-faced tank for the lead instead of wasting it in the middle, enough to make welders in field workshops copy the idea with rough steel because the official version could not arrive fast enough. The Jumbo did not replace the Sherman. It changed the meaning of seeing one. And once certainty breaks, it does not repair itself quickly. There is a lesson in that, but it is not the simple lesson people usually reach for. It is not that heavier is always better. The Jumbo was heavier, and that caused real mechanical strain. It is not that armor solves every problem. Side shots, mines, artillery, terrain, and close infantry weapons all found ways around the thick front. It is not even that one special machine can win a war by itself. The Jumbo did not win the war. The lesson is sharper. Sometimes the most powerful change in battle is not a weapon that destroys more. It is an exception that forces the enemy to doubt a rule he has survived by. For years, German anti-tank crews had watched Shermans burn when the math said they should burn. They had repeated that experience so often it hardened into instinct. The Jumbo attacked that instinct. Same outline, different consequence. Same target picture, different answer. Same first shot, different ending. That is why the disguise mattered as much as the steel. If every Jumbo had looked like a separate heavy tank, the enemy would have treated it separately. Because it looked ordinary, it infected the ordinary with doubt. Every Sherman at the head of a column became potentially abnormal. Every first shot carried the risk of exposing the gun without killing the target. Less than 1% of the Sherman family made the other 99% harder to read. The men who built that effect were not usually the men remembered in histories. Not most of the welders at Fisher. Not the ordnance engineers who accepted an imperfect, urgent solution. Not the maintenance crews who patched damaged tanks in the cold. Not the battalion staff officers whose reports turned survival into doctrine. Not many of the tankers who sat behind those thick front plates and listened for the sound that meant the next second would decide everything. Some came home. Some did not. Many returned to lives where nobody asked what it felt like to be the first vehicle on a road everyone knew was mined. Cobra King survived and became a museum piece. Other Jumbos were knocked out, scrapped, stripped, or simply disappeared into the machinery of war's cleanup. A few records remained, a few photographs, a few scars and steel, and one idea that kept echoing. Put the machine most likely to survive the first hit, where the first hit is most likely to land. That sounds obvious after someone says it. It was not obvious enough before men died proving it. By the time armored doctrine absorbed the lesson, the people who had forced the lesson into reality were already being erased by scale. Millions of tons of supplies, thousands of tanks, whole armies crossing rivers. Inside that vastness, 254 machines can vanish. But they should not, because the Jumbo showed something that applies far beyond one vehicle, one front, or one winter. A system built on certainty can be shaken by a small hidden exception. The exception does not need to be everywhere. It only needs to be where certainty fires first. The German 88 remained a terrifying gun. The Sherman remained an imperfect tank. The war remained brutal, mechanical, and wasteful beyond language. But in one narrow slice of that war, American engineers and welders found a way to turn a familiar weakness into a trap for the enemy's confidence. They did not make the Sherman look stronger. They made it look the same. Then they changed what happened when the shell arrived. That was the real weapon, not only the steel, the doubt. And for the men driving behind that thick-faced Sherman, doubt on the enemy side meant something very simple. Another breath, another shot, another mile down the road. The Jumbo was never the tank that won the war. It was the tank that stood in front long enough for other men to keep moving. And sometimes, in war, that is the difference between a machine built to kill and a machine built to bring men home.